Gail Collins famously said of Tom, "Traveling the Middle East with Tom is like going to the mall with Britney Spears." He is a rock star. And I would add that across the whole world, Tom Friedman is a force for good. We can have little idea how broadly or how well this man represents the United States of America. So that St. Louis Park Echo Cub reporter, Tom Friedman.
Thank you, David. Don't ever do that again. That's unbelievable. Really, thank you very much, David. That is a real treat. You probably wouldn't believe what David said, but in fact, I don't know if it was my first, but one of my first articles I ever wrote was in 1969, a then obscure Israeli general came to the University of Minnesota Hillel House to speak. It was after the '67 war, and someone said this guy was really important and you should go hear him. He had been a big figure in the Six-Day War. I went to hear him. I wrote up his story. It was Ariel Sharon, and our lives were sort of interwoven ever since, something I reminded him of many, many years later. It's really good to be here with all the people who had 7 o'clock dinner reservations, and thank you. Thank you for your foresight. But it's a treat to be here. Walter, I compliment you. It's been an amazing couple of days that we've been here, and you've really pulled off something terrific. And Kitty, and hats off to all of the Aspen Institute. So the title of my talk is Green is the New Red, White, and Blue. It's the subject of what I think is going to be my next book I've already started working on. And I guess it'll begin like this. My name is Tom Friedman, and I am a climate skeptic. That's right. Oh, I'm not a skeptic about global warming. That's happening. I'm a total skeptic that we're really doing anything about it. I think we're in the middle of a huge green bubble. There's a saying at the Pentagon that a vision without resources is a hallucination. And I think right now we're in the middle of a big green hallucination. The one thing this sort of green story reminds me of about parallel with the Middle East actually is a story I told probably here 10 years ago. A story about a religious Jew named Goldberg wanted to win the lottery. Goldberg would go to synagogue every Saturday and say, "God, what would be so bad if I won?" He would come and Goldberg wouldn't win. Week after week he would go to synagogue every Saturday. "God, what would be so bad if I won the lottery?" The lottery would come and Goldberg wouldn't win. Finally, one Sabbath, Goldberg goes to the library and goes, "God, I've been such a pious Jew all my life. What do I have to do to win the lottery?" And the heavens parted and the voice of God came down. "Goldberg, give me a chance. Buy a ticket." That's how I feel really about this green issue. Oh, we're all talking about it and shrine to the heavens, but we really haven't bought a ticket. So let's get real for a second. When we talk about combating global warming, what are we talking about? We're talking about changing the weather. We're talking about changing the weather. It is, if we pull it off, it would be the biggest project mankind has ever undertaken since the Tower of Babel. We're talking about changing the weather. This is a huge scale project. What are we talking about in particular? We're talking about preventing the doubling of CO2 in the atmosphere from the pre-industrial age till the year 2050. Because the generally accepted climate science says if we go past the doubling of CO2 in the atmosphere, all the climate monsters will come out the door. And by the way, on the way to the doubling, a lot will come out. That's what that's what all this story is about. Well, what do we have to do to actually prevent the doubling of CO2 in the atmosphere between now and 2050? Nate Lewis, a chemist at Caltech who works a lot in the solar energy field, I think is a brilliant scholar. He can summarize it, reduce it to just a couple of numbers. In the year 2000, the world as a whole used roughly 13 terabits of electricity, of energy. That's 13 trillion watts. If we project between now and 2050, with China growing, India growing, our economy continuing to grow, by 2050 the world will use 26 terawatts of electricity, 26 trillion watts. What do we have to do if we're going to grow like that and allow China and India to grow dirty for a while till they're able to get clean? What do we actually have to do then if we want to prevent the doubling of CO2 in the atmosphere between now and 2050? Well, what Nate says we have to do, and this is within the general consensus of the climate scientists, we have to conserve as much energy as we are now using as a world, 13 trillion watts. We have to conserve that much. And we have to produce from clean, non-emitting, CO2-emitting sources almost another 13 trillion watts from clean power. That is the scale of the project that we are engaged in. That, my friends, is the truly inconvenient truth. And no one, it seems to me, or very few people, have actually been talking about the scale of what we need to do. We need to produce 13 trillion watts of clean power at scale at the China price, or at what my friend Vinod Khosla calls the Chindia price, the price at which it will scale in China and India. This is a huge industrial project. How do we do it? Well, I think to begin doing this, first of all, you obviously have to widen the coalition of people involved in this project. It cannot just be the Aspen Ideas Festival. Obviously, it cannot just be an elites issue. And a lot of my own writing has been focused on how do we broaden the consensus of people to get them involved in this project. Now, I'm a big believer in what I do, that to name something is to own it. If you can name an issue, you can own an issue. The world is flat. My argument has been that for all these years, the people who actually named green, people who actually characterized green, were actually its opponents. And they named it liberal, tree-hugging, girly man, sissy, unpatriotic, vaguely French. Okay. Vaguely French. Okay. That was basically, if you were a green, 4 out of 5 people would associate those words with you. Now, the green movement, in my view, was equally complicit. They weren't sure if you were good enough to be green. No, Walter, not good enough, sorry. So for both of these reasons, this movement had a very hard time scaling politically. So what I've been trying to do is redefine green. redefine green as the most capitalistic, patriotic, geostrategic, pro-American, pro-growth, future-oriented thing you can do, be, or say. Green is the new red, white, and blue. Because unless we unbottle this idea and take it away from kind of the two extremes who defined it, you won't begin to get change. And my essential argument is that green is the answer to the three biggest issues facing us today, or three of the biggest: jobs, temperature, and terrorism. I think green is the answer for jobs, temperature, and terrorism. It's about how our kids compete in a flatter world, how they thrive in a warmer world, how they survive in a more dangerous world. I believe the answer to those three questions can actually be found in the concept green, or what I like to call geo-green, to distinguish it from the previous ideology. Now the good news, as is reflected by this Ideas Festival, as is reflected by the cover stories on so many magazines and newspapers, the good news is that green has gone Main Street. You cannot go into a newsstand, you cannot attend a function like this without panels about green. And that's a great thing. But green has not gone down Main Street at all, at the scale we need to prevent that doubling and to get these technologies down to the China price. Not even close. We haven't even begun to tackle that problem. 55% of our energy today still comes from coal, 20% from nuclear, 70% from natural gas, about 1.6 from wind and solar. Well, our energy use grew last year by 1.7%. So all that wind and solar just got eaten up last year. So green has gone Main Street, it hasn't gone down Main Street. Now why has green gone Main Street? I would argue three reasons: 9/11, Katrina, and the internet. Let me go through all three. 9/11 taught us that we're in a war. We're in a war on terrorism with people who are funded, fueled, and energized by our energy purchases. We are in the first war in American history, maybe in modern history, where we are funding both sides of the war. We fund the U.S. Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps with our tax dollars. We fund Al-Qaeda, Islamic Jihad, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the whole transformation of the Muslim world to the Wahhabi idea through our energy purchases. We're funding both sides of the war. How stupid is that? Okay. And I think since 9/11, people have understood that. But I would like to add a gloss. And again, why is green the solution here? And green is the solution because of what I like to call the first law of petropolitics. This is an idea I wrote about last year in Foreign Policy magazine. Now, the best way I can explain the first law of petropolitics, if I didn't have a screen here, but I should have, is what I did was I charted the price of oil, average price, from 1979 to 2005. Now, if you chart the average global price of oil from 1979 to 2005, what does your graph look like? It looks like a big V, okay? 1979, round numbers, oil was $70 a barrel. 1991 to 95, oil gets down to about $10 a barrel. Yes, with all due respect to Ronald Reagan, it was $10 a barrel oil that brought down the Soviet Union. People forget oil cratered when the Soviet Union cratered. And then oil goes back up 2005 to $70 a barrel. So that graph looks like this. Then what I did is I went to the Freedom House Freedom Index. Yeah, Freedom House, they actually index freedom in countries. Free and fair elections, newspapers, NGOs, political participation. And I overlaid the Freedom House Freedom Index